Recently, a far-right Christian journalist quoted Satansplain in an attempt to support her conspiracy theories about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, some equally annoying far-left people have gotten their panties in a twist over a politically incorrect video excerpt from Anton LaVey. I'll be addressing both of these, as well as answering listener mail about the previous 2 episodes of Satansplain, a reiteration on Satanism and politics, the landmark Satanism podcast Satanism Today, and also mathematics, along with the broader topic of developing a skill.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. It's been a few episodes since I read and responded to listener mail, so that's what we're going to do in some of this episode. I want to first thank all of you who tuned in to Satansplain episode number 99 and especially episode 100. Though whether you've been listening to Satansplain since the very first Satansplain episode or are relatively new to the show, I thank you also for just listening in general. I did get a lot of great compliments on episodes number 99 and 100, so again, thank you for that. One message here is from Victor, who commented on Facebook to say, quote, "For some time now, I have recommended this podcast for its educational value. After listening to the whole of episode number 99, I'm happy to say I will continue to sing its deserved praise. Magister Bill expressed a number of viewpoints on the topic and, like a good cafeteria tray, kept everything distinct and separate. That is vital in an emotionally charged instance, such as covering the reactions to a crime. Satanists can both invest and remain objective." End quote. And I'm especially glad that many Satanists who do not happen to share my personal political views still nonetheless told me that they enjoyed episode 99. That episode was all about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Some other listeners mentioned that they've run into other Satanism podcasts or Satanism blogs or what have you, where the host gets a little too political for their tastes as listeners. Of course, I would add that this seemingly happens to all sorts of podcasts or social media pages or entertainment companies where they just interject politics into things, and frankly, it just ruins it. There was one reply I caught on X where Justin had shared a little bit about some quarrel he had with a Church of Satan priest some years ago over something political, and as a result, he got kicked out of whatever forum it was that this Church of Satan member was running. And he said it was all water under the bridge now, but in closing, Justin said, quote, "Last time I checked, we were all apolitical." Now, I know what he meant here, and I'm sure most Satanists knew what he meant here, but I bring this up because I'd like to clarify a few things, only because I keep running into other people who will take things like what Justin said here and pull it out of context in order to try to smear the Church of Satan or even smear Satanism itself. Well, first and foremost, there is a difference between an organization being political and an individual of that organization being political. I've run into people who say, "Oh, I saw this Church of Satan member express this political view or this strong opinion, therefore that must be the official opinion of the Church of Satan." No, dummy, that's not how it works. Think of whatever your own opinions are on politics or music or movie genres or anything else. And now think of the company that you work for or the town you live in. Are your tastes the official ones for that company or for that town? No. And it doesn't even matter if you are the CEO of that company or you are the mayor of that town, because being a representative of a company or of a town, of an organization, whatever, it does not mean that any and all conceivable things you can think of or statements you can say are automatically official. I'm almost embarrassed to have to say this because it seems like such an obvious thing to me, and I'm sure it is obvious to most of you listeners out there. But again, unfortunately, there are some people out there who just don't seem to grasp this idea at all. And Justin said that he was on a forum and a Church of Satan priest was one of the ones running it as an admin, and says this admin kicked him out for merely having a different political view. What is my take on all of that? Well, do I think Church of Satan priests should not be allowed to do that? Because after all, we Satanists are allowed to have different political views? Or do I think the Church of Satan priests and other members should be able to kick people out of discussion groups they run, even if it's for stupid reasons? Well, I would actually say the latter in this case. I support that, and here's why. To be clear, there is no official Church of Satan internet forum. There never has been. And I must stress the word forum. We do have an official website. We have an official YouTube channel. There's an official Facebook page for the Church of Satan. There's an official channel on X for the Church of Satan, so on and so on. But notice those are all platforms set up primarily for one-way broadcasting. So we, the Church of Satan, we write a post or we post a video or whatever, and there it is. Now, maybe the public can comment on it, but if you go there, it's clear who is doing the broadcasting and who's doing the commenting. But as for Facebook, as for a Facebook group, not the same as a page, but a Facebook group or a message board or a chat room or a Discord server, well, those are all places built for two-way communication. You can find a lot of great forums which are run by Church of Satan members like that, but again, forums are not official. You can't just take a post from some random person within a Facebook group and say, oh, well, this must be the Church of Satan's official stance on this. No, not necessarily. You just got that from a discussion group of Satanists. In these 11 satanic rules of the earth, we say to respect somebody when in their lair, and also that if somebody annoys you in your lair, treat that person cruelly and without mercy. And lair, of course, is not limited to your house. Could be your car, your desk at the office, your personal space, or even, yes, an internet forum that you run. Like even your timeline on Facebook, if you still use that. Well, that's your lair, really, as far as things that come out of your channel. And I've seen people who join Satanism forums and then say stupid shit or they spam stuff after being told to cut that out. And in response, they say, oh, well, I'm a Satanist and I must be more satanic than you because I don't believe in rules. And you can't tell me what to do. No, asshole, you're just being a pest. And the people who run the group reserve the right to kick you out of their lair. It might make other people happy, too. Now, getting back to Justin's case, to me, frankly, it sounds like he got kicked out for stupid reasons. I won't go into the exact details of what he said he posted, but in short, it just seemed like a lame reason to get kicked off a message board, just going with his side of the story. Again, did the Church of Satan priest running that forum have a satanic right to kick him out of that forum? Yeah, they did. Why wouldn't he? Otherwise, what do you expect the Church of Satan to do? Do you expect us to tell our members, okay, you're free to set up discussion groups on the internet about whatever things you want, but only if you don't have any restrictions on what other people can post? No, we're not going to do that. Our members are free to go make a Facebook group or a Discord channel or whatever with whatever rules they want. Nobody is stopping you from creating a Discord channel with a rule like, people who voted for this politician are not allowed here. Just as you could make a group with a rule like, nobody whose first initial is the letter J is allowed to post here. The flip side to all of this, of course, is that, well, one, if you have too many rules like that, Satanists are less likely to want to post there. I mean, I think it's good to have some rules in Satanism discussion groups so that the timeline doesn't get clogged by, say, some Jesus freak spamming Bible verses every minute or some equally annoying idiot posting 800 YouTube clips of death metal videos. Rules against things like that actually help keep the talk productive. But on the other hand, if you have too many rules that don't help and just make you look like some control freak, then people are less likely to want to post there and contribute. But the bigger point to all this is that if you don't like how an internet forum is run, you have the freedom to go post somewhere else. You can go to one of the thousands of other Satanism discussion groups there are on the internet, or even make your own. Personally, the best Satanism forums, in my experience, have been the ones with no political posts allowed. In fact, I think it's a good rule for not just Satanism forums, but any internet forum in general if the topic itself has nothing to do with politics. Because political threads usually just lead to a lot of pointless drama that goes nowhere. And again, it's not about being afraid of offending people. It's about cutting out the noise to raise the productiveness of discussion. Well, in any case, I'm glad that Justin here did not, from what I can see, become one of those people who, after getting kicked out of one message board, just whines about it and tries to blame the Church of Satan somehow. In closing, let me share what I said in my reply to Justin on X, just to paraphrase. I would be lying if I said I myself, Bill M., am apolitical. I most certainly am political. I have strong political convictions when it comes to a number of ideas. Therefore, I'm political. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that there are Church of Satan members with completely opposite political views than mine. They are still Satanists. They agree with the Satanic Bible no less than I do. This is one of the big reasons why the Church of Satan operates apolitically as an organization. It would not make any sense otherwise. Politics tries to solve problems of populations. Satanism serves the self. I'm going to repeat that last line because somebody on X found it even worth quoting. Politics tries to solve problems of populations. Satanism serves the self. Never mind the fact that if a political party or a congressional bill or what have you got an endorsement from the Church of Satan, that wouldn't be good PR for that thing, now would it? But more importantly, I don't want to abuse my podcast as a place for me to pointlessly give hot political takes. Granted, I've stated some overviews of where I stand on certain issues, but only when it relates to some broader Satanism topic that I'm talking about in that episode. Otherwise, who wants to hear that shit? How would a personal rant from me against, I don't know, say Joe Biden be any more relevant than a personal rant from me against pizza toppings that I don't like? I know I hate it when I listen to a podcast or visit a page that's supposed to be about a certain topic and I just hear political shit instead. So again, I am political. I take no shame of that, but I have other places where I vent that sort of stuff. The show is Satansplain. It's not the Bill M. Variety Hour. Well, anyway, enough of that. Let's move on to something a little more fun here. I have a satanic anecdote that I was going to share in episode number 99, but it just didn't fit in with the flow of things. So let me share it with you now. This is a satanic anecdote, or as we call them here for short on Satansplain, a Satanecdote. Cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Somebody, I honestly forget who it was offhand, and I'm sorry. Somebody alerted me to the fact that the Daily Caller quoted me in one of their articles. A Christian journalist by the name of Mary Rooke decided to quote Satansplain in an article she was writing. What was the article about? Well, it was about the Charlie Kirk shooting. Now you may be thinking, oh, well, she must have quoted Satansplain episode number 99, since that was the whole topic of the show, Charlie Kirk. No. She quoted a much older Satansplain episode where I happened to reply to an email I got from a listener asking about the phenomenon of furries and my take on the whole thing as a Satanist. Now you may be asking yourselves a very good question at this point. What in the hell does that have to do with Charlie Kirk? Well, it seems that this Christian journalist, Mary Rooke of the Daily Caller, wrote an article titled Transgender Boyfriend of Charlie Kirk Shooter Reportedly Has Ties to demonic trend. Feel free to look up this cheap rag of an article and read it on your own. I will give you my summary, though. Charlie Kirk was allegedly shot by Tyler Robinson. I say allegedly because I honestly don't know what the status is of all that stuff right now. Robinson reportedly had a trans boyfriend named Lance Twiggs. Some reports say the two of them had some interest in furry culture. This lady writing for the Daily Caller then seemed to look for any connections she could possibly find between furries and Satanism. And threw them together. Therefore, she argues, Charlie Kirk's assassination is part of this growing trend of perverted and explicitly satanic things. Well, needless to say, this is not journalism. This is not somebody who was sincerely trying to get answers by asking sincere questions and doing sincere research. No, this is somebody who already came up with her own conclusion and then later went to selectively find or make up things to try to back that up. Quote, furry culture is overtly sexual. Online forums are filled with descriptions of humans role-playing as animals engaging in sexual activity. Still, what's worse is that this subculture is a version of humanity that claims we are nothing more than animals, which also happens to be a core tenet of the Church of Satan. End quote. And immediately after this, in the article, is where she puts in a link to say, quote, sign up for Mary Rooke's weekly newsletter. Here, go figure. Continuing on with another bit of the article, Satansplain podcast host Magister Bill M. addressed whether or not furry culture was compatible with the Church of Satan in a 2023 episode titled Legal Recognition of the Church of Satan. In the majority of the episode, Bill spoke about the history behind becoming a legally recognized religious organization, but towards the end, he addressed listener mail, asking about the furry fandom and Satanism. And from there, Mary Rooke goes on to quote part of what I said in that Satansplain episode. Does she quote the part where I say that, as I understand it, furry culture seems to be a catch-all term used to describe some different and largely unrelated things? No, she doesn't quote me saying that. Does she quote the part of the Satansplain episode where I say that some furries are accused of being pedophiles, and whether or not there's any validity to that Satanism explicitly condemns pedophilia? No, she leaves that part out. Does she quote the part where I note that many people identify as furries but do not see it as a sexual thing at all? No, she doesn't mention that, that it's more of a costume thing for them. No, she doesn't quote me on that at all. What she does quote, of course, is the part where I do address people who do see it as some kind of kinky thing. Here's the part of me she quoted from that article, quote, and as for adults who may do the furry thing as a harmless kink with other consenting adults, this is what I said in the Satansplain episode. Well, in that case, as a Satanist, I have no problem with that because, as we do also say in the Satanic Bible, we are okay with any sort of so-called sexual deviancy so long as it's with consenting adult humans. It doesn't matter how weird it may seem to other people because that's irrelevant. If you find something that's pleasurable to you and you're doing that in the privacy of your bedroom with consenting adults, then, I don't care. Bill answered. Or at least that's what she attempted to quote me as saying. I'm pretty sure I said, you know what, I don't care, or something similar that makes grammatical sense. She quoted it as, then, what don't I care? I don't think I would have said that. But, it's my guess, however, that Mary Rooke here decided to just blindly copy and paste what YouTube may have transcribed for the episode, or some other thing may have automatically transcribed of my words, without bothering to listen to the episode to check whether or not it was accurate. That would be way too much work for a journalist to do. Click on a play button and listen. And I think this next part she quotes me from the article kind of confirms that that's what happened. She was going by a bad transcription. This is what she quoted me as saying. Satanism explicitly states that humans are animals. This is in our 9 satanic statements. It's satanic statement number 7, in fact. We have our own formal ritual to celebrate this concept. You can find that in the Satanic Rituals, and I am talking about zoo drama, and as part of Das Tierdrama, participants dress up and act like anthropomorphized animals. End quote. He added. So this journalist, Mary Rooke, just took it at the word of YouTube or whatever that I had really said zoo drama, not Das Tierdrama, the name of the ritual. I said Das Tierdrama twice, and the transcription got the first one wrong, but not the second one. But again, this journalist just seemed to just take the transcription it is without actually listening. Well, she finishes off this section of her article by saying this. While not all furries consider themselves Satanists, there is a growing support for their connection. In May 2024, parents with students at 2 elementary schools in Sacramento County reported seeing furries adorned with satanic symbols at parks near the school as children were getting out of class, CBS News reported. So, like I said, the article goes on, desperately trying to find any possible ways that the furry phenomenon and Satanism overlap. Because, obviously, she's not a journalist. She's not trying to get any kind of facts down and report them objectively. No, she has an agenda to try to tie the Charlie Kirk assassination together with furries and especially Satanism. Then on top of that, trying to push the idea that this is all some interrelated and growing trend. In fact, her approach is even worse than all that, because I don't think she even made any effort to do this quote-unquote research. She probably just used some AI tool to scrape the internet for these ideas and put them together. Search the internet for furries and Satanism together. Because, for example, she talks about the Satansplain episode by saying, in the majority of the episode, Bill spoke about the history behind becoming a legally recognized religious organization, and then only later answers the listener's email. Okay. Stop and think about this for a second. Why would you even mention that part of the episode instead of leaving that out and just going straight to the listener email part? Because, that part is what supports your agenda. The first part doesn't. Why even mention it was a listener email at all? You could have quoted my words directly to fit your agenda. Again, I suspect that she used an AI tool to summarize what I said, and then, of course, took some blindly transcribed words without even bothering to check for mistakes. And that's all on top of just using AI in general to try to find any and all Satanism and furry-related things on the internet. By the way she presents the link to the Satansplain episode in her article is especially amusing, and I think it confirms my suspicions. Does she use the link for the Satansplain episode on YouTube? No. Does she use the link for the Satansplain episode on Spotify or the link on Audible? No. From the main Satansplain website? No. What does she use? Well, she searches churchofsatan.com for any and all posts tagged with the word furries, and she gives the link to those search results, of which there is only one, and only one search result, the announcement post from the Church of Satan about the Satansplain episode. And that's what she posts for the link. So again, she does not post a direct link to a Satansplain episode. She posts the link that gives you the results of searching churchofsatan.com for the word furries. Well, I quote tweeted her post on X, and I said this to her publicly. Let me read you what I wrote. Hey, Mary Rooke, I see that you quoted me in this Daily Caller article of yours, which frankly appears to be a desperate attempt to somehow connect Charlie Kirk's assassin to furries and furries to Satanism. I'm guessing that the words you took from Satansplain episode number 47 were from some sort of bad automatic transcription, because I did not say you can find that in the Satanic Rituals, and I'm talking about zoo drama. What I said was you can find that in the Satanic Rituals, and I'm talking about Das Tierdrama. Strangely enough, you got it correct the sentence after that. I also see that, like many Christians, you've ignorantly fallen for the bait of Kevin Solling's political prank group, the Satanic Temple, My guess is you searched the web for any and all places where the words furries and Satanism showed up together, and proceeded to ignorantly conflate them all to try to argue that there's a demonic trend. I may be a Satanist, but I'm also a proud American and registered Republican, and it disgusts me that you would try to imply that my religion had something to do with Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination, instead of blaming the individual criminal. And yeah, I made a point of throwing that last part in about my politics, because regardless of how any of you fellow Satanists out there feel about Charlie Kirk or about politics, in my opinion, I think it can be fun and effective to argue with emotional conservative ideologues from the more conservative position. Or for that matter, liberals from the more liberal position, or libertarians from the more libertarian position, and so on. Arguing like that kind of throws them for a loop. And Mary Rooke's response to all of this was to block me. She promptly blocked me on X, and then when some other Satanists replied to likewise call her out on her bullshit, she just blocked them. Well, that's Christians for you. Which ironically is probably the opposite of what Charlie Kirk would have done. In fact, going back to what I said about attacking conservatives from the more conservative angle, or liberals from the more liberal angle, and so on, maybe that's a line you can try. If a conservative is being a complete dick, don't ask him why he's not behaving more like Jesus. No, ask them why they're not behaving more like Charlie Kirk. Not all of them, but when some conservative Christian shows up where you're just minding your own business or posting about something else, and they just angrily post Bible verses and ignores questions and throws logical discourse out the window and won't read any links you give them and so on, you should tell that person, hey, this whole approach of yours is so intellectually cowardly. You're not debating. You just like the buzz of getting all fire and brimstone on other people. You're a dick. You should try being more like Charlie Kirk. Actually listen and thoughtfully debate. Tell them that. That will probably make one or two heads explode, if you do it correctly. Though they'll probably just block you without replying, just like Mary Rooke here did. Anyway, let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
The Satanic Scriptures hands down the wit, wisdom, and diabolical perspective of the Church of Satan's High Priest, Magus Peter H. Gilmore. These essays, articles, and diatribes have been collected from over 20 years of the High Priest's writings for his infernal cabal, some first issued in the pages of publications available only to insiders. From the magic of toys to techniques of time travel, Magus Gilmore leads the reader down a left-hand path where few will find what they expect. Magus Gilmore reveals principles of satanic ritual in a frank discussion of forbidden rites. What is a satanic funeral? How do Satanists marry? Find out now, as these unholy ceremonies have never been disclosed outside of the Church of Satan's hellish hierarchy. Here is the philosophy for those bold enough to be their own gods or devils.
Visit thesatanicscriptures.com for more information. Released by Scapegoat Publishing. Available in paperback form from major booksellers and independents nationwide.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense. Sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you're on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, whatever the equivalent is on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The email address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to Satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support the show. Though we also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support the show in one way or another. In other satanic podcast news, you can find a couple of new shows over on RadioFreeSatan.com. Episode 2 of Devilish Gentleman Radio recently launched, as did Episode 2 of Blues Diabolic. You may know Warlock Robert Shirley from his show, The Neutral Wisdom Podcast, but he has come on to Radio Free Satan with his new show, Devilish Gentleman Radio. Enjoy a journey back to the time of classic Las Vegas nightlife, sharkskin suits, cigarettes, and cocktails. And also, DJ Mark Hill brings us the Blues Diabolic Podcast, an indulgence in the devil's music. And in Episode 2 of Blues Diabolic, he talks about why the blues is referred to as the devil's music and where that description originated from. And of course, a selection of blues music to go with it. You can check out both of those shows on RadioFreeSatan.com. Of course, you can also find my other podcast, The Devil's Mischief, on RadioFreeSatan.com, and I think I'm going to be making a new episode of that soon. I'm certainly going to be doing an episode for Halloween as well. But in the meantime, let's get back to Satansplain. Brent writes, there are people alive today who knew Anton LaVey, correct? He is going to be the Jesus of Satanism. Don't you think we should get as many stories and details of him as possible now? Imagine how invaluable it could be 2,000 years from now. It will still be relevant, I believe. Well, first of all, as for LaVey being the Jesus of Satanism, if you mean the founder of the religion, then sure. But let us be clear to any newbies who may be listening, Anton LaVey is not viewed as some sort of savior in the religion of Satanism. Satanism does not work like that. Unlike some religions like Christianity or Buddhism or Islam, where the personal biography of the founder and what he did with his life is taken as part of that religion's dogma, the same is not true of Satanism. In fact, as I think I mentioned just a few episodes back, you could be a person who knows absolutely nothing about the life of Anton LaVey, and yet you could pick up the Satanic Bible, agree with it to the point where you can honestly identify as a Satanist, and thus be a Satanist. But to answer Brent's question here about Anton LaVey, yes, there are plenty of personal associates of his who are still alive. We do have a lot of his life details recorded and personal anecdotes from people who knew him. And I listed some examples for Brent in my email back to him. There's The Secret Life of a Satanist biography, a lot of other details in books like We Are Satanists. There's the 1993 documentary Speak of the Devil. There's Carl Abrahamison's book, Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, as well as the documentary he made and released on Vimeo called Into the Devil's Den. Now then, are there other friends of his who are alive and have some great stories they could tell about their interactions with him? Yes, I'm sure. But again, there's certainly a lot already recorded, too. And on top of all that, I'm sure there are Satanists who had some personal stories to tell that are great stories, and they personally treasure them, but perhaps they don't want to share them with the world. Same with photographs and so on. That's their choice. Speaking of the Speak of the Devil documentary, Emilio writes in to say, first, that he has had a great fascination with Satanism as a religion, and came to hold Anton LaVey in high regard after reading his works, going so far as to say he was probably one of the most brilliant philosophers of his time. Because Emilio says, quote, the satanic mentality he's gifted us has greatly helped me throughout my life in multiple aspects. And in this same email, Emilio then points out that he came across this video clip posted by some people with an axe to grind with the Church of Satan, of course. Emilio says it was a video clip of Anton LaVey blatantly using multiple racial slurs during a quote-unquote destruction ritual, followed by a racist statement. Emilio says, now I will not make the idiotic mistake of jumping to conclusions based on a short 30-second video with absolutely no context given at all. I further read that it was a cut scene from Speak of the Devil, so my best guess is that it must simply be a joke, possibly of the times. during the filming. I know LaVey had quite a cynical, dark sense of humor. I don't believe he was a white supremacist, Nazi, or whatever. Yet I'm still not quite sure what to make of this clip, so I would like to get your insight on it. Perhaps it's something that has long been debunked or discarded, and I'm just completely out of the loop. Regardless, I thank you for your podcast. It's helped me to learn a lot, and I wish you a truly satanic day, Mr. M. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've gotten a lot out of Satansplain. So thank you for writing, Emilio. I wrote back to Emilio and said, yes, that clip you found was an outtake from the 1993 documentary Speak of the Devil. And yes, you are correct that LaVey was not a white supremacist or neo-Nazi. The idiots who make those accusations can never explain, for example, why so much of Satanism doesn't line up with that sort of ideology. For example, the fact that the Satanic Bible explicitly says homosexuality is okay. Good luck trying to find a match for that in neo-Nazi literature. Not to mention the recurring themes in Satanism of individual merit. The fact that you have this ethnicity or that ethnicity doesn't tell us anything about whether you're a Satanist or what you're doing with your life or doing in the world. I have met Church of Satan members of all sorts of races and sexual orientations and lifestyles, so again, it's an absurd accusation. Now, as for this clip with the blatant racist stuff, well, from what I've learned, this was a scripted scene, which was decidedly cut. It was cut because people felt it didn't seem to work, and I would say they're right. So why would something like this be filmed in the first place? Well, recall that the Satanic Bible talks about the ceremony known as the Black Mass, which is essentially a blasphemous parody of the Catholic Mass. But LaVey argues in the book that this ritual wouldn't really have the same sort of impact as it would have today, because quite simply, the Catholic Church is no longer considered this most sacred of places that holds all the power and that you can't say anything against. So, LaVey argues in the Satanic Bible that a Satanist might perform a black mass for the pure psychodrama of it all, to say, purge any sort of guilt you have in the back of your mind from being a victim of religious programming. It can help you deprogram that. But if you wanted to do a real black mass from modern times, well, you wouldn't blaspheme the Catholic Church necessarily. You would blaspheme stuff that is actually considered sacred to people these days. Now, what would be the most blasphemous thing you could say these days, or even in 1993? Well, phrases like God damn it or Jesus fucking Christ, I wouldn't say things like that. No, I would say things like the N-word. I don't even want to say it on here on the show because it would probably get me flagged and all that stuff. And it's not hard to think of other politically incorrect stuff as well, other racial slurs and what have you. So my guess is that this is why lines like that were staged for the documentary. What I heard is that LaVey thought this scene just flopped and he wanted it out, thinking, it just wouldn't land in the way it was intended. It turns out that the documentary maker, Nick Bougas, had considered having several scripted scenes throughout the documentary of people saying this or that in addition to the interview material, but decided in the end to scrap that idea. It was just too confusing trying to go back between scripted stuff and stated things in interviews, so that was scrapped. Never mind the fact that I don't know any white supremacists who would use words like hunky. Do you? Well, if the scene never made it into the documentary, how did people obtain this clip? It seems that it was Stanton LaVey, LaVey's estranged grandson, who got a hold of the footage and decided to select that clip out and put it on the internet. Well, to be clear, Stanton LaVey was never a member of the Church of Satan. Quite frankly, I found him to be a loser. He was a drug user and was arrested for kidnapping, and he had this weirdly obsessive love-hate relationship with his grandfather. He was always trying to make money by saying, look, everybody, I'm the grandson of Anton LaVey, and auctioning off personal items he was bequeathed, or photocopying things like that and adding his own autograph, things like that. Of course, Satanism is not hereditary. You don't get any special treatment in Satanism for happening to have a percentage of Anton LaVey's DNA. You have to actually deliver the goods. You have to show that you do adhere to the philosophy, and it seemed quite obvious to me that Stanton could not do that. In any case, he wound up with this extra footage from the documentary and decided to go post it on his channel to be all edgy. But of course, he didn't get it, and neither did his audience. Well, one final thing I'll say on this, it's interesting that the people who try to share this clip as some proof of Anton LaVey or the Church of Satan being actual racists, which again was left out because the makers of the documentary thought it just came off as lame. These detractors never seem to notice a particular line which did make it into the documentary. And that line is this, spoken by Anton LaVey. We are superior, and we are not superior by ethnic means, but the superior force of the will, the imagination, the creativity, and the very essence of resourcefulness. So no, Anton LaVey was not a white supremacist, and as he states clearly in that same 1993 documentary, in a scene that was not cut from it, that we Satanists, are superior, but that it has nothing to do with ethnicity. Of course, I realized that this answer won't be good enough for some people. Some people are just too ingrained in some ideology or another, in this case, let's say left-wing ideology, such that if you said a racial slur at any time in your past, or you had some positive thing to say in a book review that was written by a guy who later became a white supremacist, well, none of that actually matters. That's that. You're guilty by association. I've likewise seen idiots try to argue that since Anton LaVey took some lines from Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, and that the book has some racist stuff in it, Might is Right has some incredibly racist stuff in it, well, then that makes LaVey or the Church of Satan or Satanism itself racist or fascist-based by extension. Again, it doesn't matter to these people when you point out that the racist stuff in Might is Right was not the stuff that LaVey quoted or found inspiration in. It doesn't matter because these people don't operate on logic. They operate on a game I call the 6 Degrees of Hitler. All they know is guilt by association. These people are just as illogical and annoying as their far-right counterparts who see the word Satan or Satanism and they don't care about anything else you have to say or what accusations they make about us that may be absolute lies. These ideologues, these collectivists simply don't care. There's no convincing them. In both cases, the best we Satanists could do, I would argue, is correct the misinformation so that at least any onlookers who do have at least half a brain can see the real deal and see what we actually believe and do. Nikolai asks about Satansplain episode number 100. He wrote in to say Magus Gilmore mentioned a specific book and wanted to know which one that was. Well, the answer as to that book that he mentions in episode 100, it's the book Witchcraft, Its Power in the World Today. And that was written by William Seabrook, published in 1940. You can find some info on that on the web. Do a simple search. In fact, to quickly tie this back to the last point I just made, I'm sure there are some atheists out there who may whine, oh, well, if Satanism is atheistic, why would I read a witchcraft book? I guess these people don't grasp the concept of reading a book and finding some useful stuff in it, even if you don't agree with everything in the book. There is indeed a materialistic approach and application you can take with concepts like witchcraft or ritual. This is all explained in the Satanic Bible, not to mention explained in some prior episodes of Satansplain. One more email I want to read in this episode. I am admittedly behind in my emails, so if you've written and I haven't responded to you yet, I may just not have gotten around to it. But here's one final email for this episode. Jordan writes, Hi, Bill. I hope you are doing well. This email pertains to a few random questions I've been meaning to ask your thoughts on. First off, I've heard numerous times on the show that you're a mathematician. As someone who's always struggled with math myself, I'm quite curious what one who has invested the time to obtain a degree in it sees that the layman might not. There's a beauty in math that I know is there, even if I lack the literacy to interpret it. Furthermore, how would you recommend going about it in terms of self-study? I believe it would be very satanic of me to make this old demon of mine work for me rather than the reverse? Lastly, if you had an opportunity to learn it differently than you had, would you do so? Second, are you aware and or have any thoughts on the Satanism Today podcast hosted by a certain Magister David Harris in efforts to find other podcasts pertaining to the church outside of the glorious offerings provided by Ready for Satan? I've stumbled upon this deserted series. 12 episodes are all that remain, with the last being posted January 10th, 2009, with interviews of various members on a number of controversial topics. Could this be a previous incarnation of Satansplain? I once again look forward to future episodes of Satansplain and the Devil's Mischief until they are brought forth. Farewell and hail Satan. Well, thank you for the email, Jordan. I'm almost certain, by the way, that this is not the same Jordan who emailed me some crazy stuff that I read in a past episode. No, this is sane Jordan writing this time, not the insane Jordan. So first, regarding mathematics, I wrote a bit about this in an essay called The Number and the Beast, which was published in a book called The Satanic Life. It was an essay collection. That book was with essays from different Satanists, but as far as learning mathematics goes or improving on your own math, I have a couple things to say about that, and they are things which I think apply to other subjects in life. First of all, I've noticed that whenever the math thing comes up in conversation, like, for example, oh, what did you go to college for? Or, oh, what's that book you're reading, Bill? The reaction I almost always get when I tell them, it's a math thing or this or that, they'll say, oh, Bill, I'm terrible at math. I've joked before that being a mathematician seems to scare more people than the fact that I'm a Satanist. Comedian George Carlin once pointed out that people love to say that they're terrible at math, but they'll never say, for example, that they're a bad driver. And I think he aptly points out that being bad at math is a socially acceptable thing. Not only that, but I see people who almost get cocky about it. Now, I can understand people having some self-depreciating humor. Haha, I'm bad at math, and knowing their limits and so on. Just as you say, oh, you're dancing. Oh, well, gee, I have 2 left feet. I couldn't do what you do. Haha. Yeah, I get that. But as a Satanist, I never understood these people who get all pretentious about not knowing something or not being able to do something. One expression I absolutely fucking hate is, you must have too much time on your hands. That expression is always used against somebody who took the time to do something creative or maybe something eccentric or silly, but for some reason the observer feels threatened and wants to discuss it. Oh, you read a 1,000-page book. Oh, you created a replica of the Statue of Liberty using pipe cleaners. Oh, you must have too much time on your hands. Meanwhile, the person who said that just played video games for 6 straight hours, and that's what they do every day. What do you care how other people choose to spend their free time? So again, I don't get it. But getting back to the people who maybe aren't necessarily aren't maybe necessarily cocky about not being good at math, but felt the compulsion to tell me this. Sometimes I ask them why that is. I'll press them. I'll ask them about their prior exposure to math. Why is it that you think you're bad at math and so on? And almost always they will tell me they had one or more really terrible math teachers at school. Teachers who were just going through the motions, had no passion for the subject. I remember one person telling me her math teacher was the gym teacher who just happened to be free that period, and he would just copy arithmetic problems from a book onto the chalkboard, have the students shut up and work on them while he sat down and read a newspaper. I've even had multiple women tell me that they were told, usually by an older sister or their mother, oh, that's okay if you're bad with math or science, because, those are boy subjects. There was an effort here in the United States to try to correct these problems with math, and it was called Common Core. And a lot of people to this day love to bash Common Core because they look at a couple of isolated examples of math problems they found on the internet and they don't know what it's about. They say, well, why can't you just do things the old way? I did it the old way and I got the answer quicker than you did. Well, first of all, math is not a race to get to the correct answer. One of the whole points of teaching math is to teach things like logic and abstract reasoning. If you're just going through the motions without understanding what you're doing or why it works, then I would argue you're not really learning to think analytically. You're not really training your analytical mind. From what I understand about Common Core, a lot of these programs would show different ways of solving the same math problem. Because there's often more than one way to reason things out and get the correct answer. And for some students, something more visual may help them get the idea. For other students, they would find one of the other methods to be helpful. So getting back to Jordan's questions, I would say, first of all, you have to rid yourself of this idea that a person is either good at math or bad at math. Again, it's one thing to accept that there are things you don't know and things you might not be good at. But if you keep defining yourself as somebody who is bad at something, you're never going to improve. I mean, I'm a musician as well, and I've had to tell some people that I've given lessons to, don't think of yourself as an eternally bad guitar player or a bad singer. There was no exact moment when you go from not having a skill to having a skill. And I would argue that there are some skills in life that you can't really afford to be an absolute zero about. I run into people all the time who tell me they're bad with computers, for example. Well, that was a cute thing to say maybe back in 1995. Today, not so much. Now, obviously, that doesn't include any of you listeners out there, because, hey, if you're listening to me right now, you were able to figure out how to go to a website or an app and click on a few buttons to listen to this podcast. But you would be surprised how many people out there treat that as rocket science. It's fine, again, to not be an expert, but I would say it's stupid to think, well, I'm just one of these people who knows nothing about it, so that's that. I mean, not everybody is going to be an auto mechanic, but if you have a car, maybe it's worth having a knowledge level above zero and know how to check your oil or how to change a tire. But continuing on the computer example, it's not even clear what a computer expert would be. There are so many little things that fall under the category of computers. I've met expert Java language programmers who didn't know anything about hardware. I've known computer hardware engineers who didn't know anything about database administration and so on. Likewise, with mathematics, you can have a PhD in, say, number theory, but not know much of anything about statistics. You could be a statistician professionally who doesn't know anything about Fourier transforms and so on. So my point to all this is that whether it's mathematics or some other subject, it's not as simple as you're either terrible at it or you're an expert. Learning a skill is a continuum. And the most expert virtuosos of mathematics or of music or actually of any other skill will have a passion for what they're doing and know that they don't know everything. So the question about how I was able to invest the time to get my degrees in math, well, it's something I enjoy. It's something I'm fascinated by. It's something I like to lose myself in. So if you find something in life that captivates you like that, then I would think you're naturally going to want to learn more about it. The Satanists I've met in the Church of Satan invariably had some passion for one thing or another, something. Not just a passion for Satanism itself or for identity politics or politics in general, but, the passion for something else. And I love seeing these people in the Church of Satan who have a real skill or passion for something and they get excited about it. I think that attitude is contagious in a good way. You be around successful people like that and puts you in a good mood and makes you want to do things. That's how it's been for me. As for the question of what I see in mathematics that the layman perhaps does not, well, I see beauty. I see the beauty in how things can fit together in unexpected ways. I see mystique in mathematics. I see fun challenges. There is the practicality of things like arithmetic, sure. We got to balance checkbooks and things like that once in a while. But math is hardly limited to that. Mathematics is a model that humans have invented that can be used to model seemingly almost anything in life, at least in some way. I'd like to think that I take a sort of mathematical approach to Satansplain in the way that I try to distill certain things down to points and work them out like an equation, you could say. As for the question of what a person can do for self-study and maybe develop more of an interest in mathematics, well, there are dozens of books I could recommend. That's another thing that seems to creep people out, the fact that I buy and read mathematics books in my spare time. Though before I mention books, maybe you could start with some particular thing that captures your interest and explore it from there. Maybe there are properties of certain numbers you've noticed, and you're curious to know more of what's going on. Maybe you have questions like, what are the odds of winning this lottery game? And how would you go about figuring that out? Or maybe it's, hey, I saw this sci-fi movie where they talk about time as a fourth dimension. What does that mean? Maybe it's something geometrical. You can look at the pentagram and see that it displays this sort of symmetry. It also contains a special proportion called the golden ratio. That's a mathematics rabbit hole you can easily immerse yourself in, the golden ratio. Though I would warn that there's some incorrect mathematics thrown into that topic from assorted mystics on occasion. But for books, there's a fun book that was actually written for older children. It's called The Number Devil by Hans Enzensberger. And it's a story about a boy who is struggling with math, and he doesn't see the point, but then he's visited in the night by a number devil who shows him all sorts of beauty and ways of seeing math. I think even adults could benefit from that, that book. There's also the book Innumeracy by John Allen Paulos, which talks about mathematical illiteracy. Morris Klein is another author. He wrote a lot of books that explain mathematics really well to non-mathematicians. I would recommend his book, Mathematics and the Physical World. Charles Seif, or Seif, I'm not sure how he pronounces his name, but he wrote a book called Zero, The Biography of a Dangerous Idea, which was ultimately about the number zero, but he connects it to a whole history of mathematics and some other fundamental ideas in math. As for the question, if I had to do it all over again, would I study math differently? Well, I probably would have picked a different focus in college. Still mathematics, but maybe within a branch where I maybe would have enjoyed some classes a little more. But as a professor told me back then, it's not so much about which classes you take for your degree, because once you get out and you want to work on something in particular, you have the skills to go select that and research that on your own. Well, enough rambling from me about math. Let's get to the end here. So Jordan also asked about Satanism Today. That was a podcast that was launched and hosted by Magister David Harris sometime in the early 2000s. It was, in fact, on Radio Free Satan at some point. It was also broadcasted through a site called Free Thought Radio, a distributor for atheism and other philosophically free thought podcasts. I was actually a guest on Satanism Today at some point. Magister Paradise was also producing a video version of the show where he was setting looping video images to the audio from the show and making them available on DVD. I think he was also broadcasting them to his cable access show. So I still have some of my copies of the DVDs. Actually, I used the term podcast, but that term had not been coined yet. These sorts of things were called internet radio shows or something similar at the time. As I know I mentioned on an old episode of Satansplain, the pod in podcast, as I understand it, derives from iPod, the MP3 player. And the idea, which was introduced to Radio Free Satan sometime in the mid-2000s, was, hey, instead of having to tune into a show at a specific time on this live stream, well, most people have faster internet speeds these days and bigger hard drives, and therefore you can download entire episodes as MP3s so that you can listen to them on your iPod. And that's what we'll call podcasts. So, yeah, I have to laugh a bit when I hear the term live podcast because it's a contradiction in terms. Well, in any case, that's what you had to do back in the day to listen to Satanism Today or listen to shows on Radio Free Satan before the podcasting thing came into play. You had to go to your computer and use your modem to connect to the internet. Then you used a program like Winamp or whatever to stream a link. We used to have different Radio Free Satan shows on rotation several times a day, so you had to pick a time to tune in. But as for Satanism Today, I would say that it was a very historically important show for Satanism. Granted, you could point to even earlier examples in the 20th century of some Satanists who managed to get cable access shows or shows on late night radio, AM broadcasts, or had recorded dialogues they'd distribute on cassette or whatever. But Satanism Today really set the standard for satanic podcasts, I would say. And I've said before that Magister David Harris established that with Satanism Today, and the rest of us Satanists with a podcast have just been trying to match that standard. So when you ask me if Satanism Today was a previous incarnation of Satansplain, well, you flatter me with that comparison. I just celebrated episode 100 of Satansplain with an interview with the Church of Satan High Priest. Do you know when Satanism Today did that? Do you know when they interviewed the High Priest? Was it Satanism Today episode 100? Episode 90? Episode 50? No. Episode 1. Episode 1, the debut episode of Satanism Today, went right out of the gates with an interview with Magus Peter H. Gilmore. One of the things they talked about was the upcoming book Magus Gilmore was working on, which of course became the Satanic Scriptures. Now, as for there being only 12 episodes of Satanism Today, well, there were a hell of a lot more than that, though I know that podcasts come and go, and it can be difficult to try to find any existing copies of Satanism Today out there, at least in the public. I'm sure the Church of Satan or Magister Harris himself has all the episodes archived somewhere. I have a few myself and somewhere on my hard drive. Well, in any case, I must be doing something right if people are comparing me to Satanism Today, and in a good way. Let's see how the next 100 episodes of Satansplain go. Until then, thank you for listening, and hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.